No Harry Potter movie is
And
good.
you're like, give me the Snyder Cut. Oh, sorry, just walk in front of you here. I'm gonna put my popcorn down. Oh, sorry, gotta put this here.
Universal needs to sue Sony.
Hey, I'm an idiot. I was fired from Fox. Let me go.
I'd like actually to see Venom just crush Spider-Man.
Hello everyone, so I'm back today and I'm going to talk about Avatar The Way of Water, which after weeks of putting off, I finally watched. Now, I got to start this off and, kind of express some very important things. First of all, I would like to apologize as, typically I'm pretty on point, but in this case, I was wrong. And I would like to apologize to all of those who I have criticized this movie toward having not seen it. Now, in hindsight, that was dumb. But, as you can tell, I'm here in remorse and I'm admitting I was wrong. I said this was going to be a terrible movie and it managed to exceed my expectations. It was not terrible. It was above average. And for that, you got to give it all the credit. Now, I want to talk about this movie in a few parts. First of all, I want to talk about this in the part of the length, because that was a big thing being talked about, I think, at least by me. And I'm sure there were other people talking about it as well. And what I would say is, look, a 3-hour movie you need to be able to justify it being 3 hours, as in, if I'm falling asleep at the end of the 2 hours, then you better have a good reason to make another hour, because if you don't, then I'm not going to be happy, right? Endgame, I didn't think it could justify 3 hours. Like it could in theory, but in reality, it wasn't able to do that, right? There are very few movies that have been able to justify a long run time. Now, I got to say, this movie did not justify the 3 hours. The story justified the 3 hours just enough that it wasn't boring. Okay, so it was basically the story was just good enough that the visual being amazing was enough for it to be okay and for me not to say, hey, why is this so long? Again, there are some parts which, you could cut out, but I don't think the story was nearly as boring as I expected. And again, we got to always remember this. I'm not looking at this as an Avatar fan. I'm looking at this as someone who said, my expectations will be met if this is just a decent movie. And it was able to be just above that. So, if we're saying 5 is completely an average movie, this was at 5.5 or 6, just slightly above the average. Which is good. I mean, again, that's something you should be really taking now, if you told me this was $1 billion movie, if you took the name Avatar out of it, wouldn't believe you. I'd call you stupid. And so that's, a little bit different. But I think a lot of the time is watching a movie. I think there are a lot of things my focus is going to be on the story. Why? Because the cinematography, the VFX, all that stuff was basically flawless, and everyone needs to be given a huge round of applause for that, because it was really a stunning visual thing. And I don't think that I think that needs to be given the credit it deserves. So, kind of moving beyond that now, let's talk a little bit about the story, right? Because I think that is where every flaw in this movie, you know what it's like? I'll tell you what it's like, okay? So it's like a football team, right? American football team, where you have a great defense, but your offense is terrible, right? You can go pretty far with good visuals and good cinematography and all that stuff. But if your offense is flawed, you're never going to win a championship, right? That's the same thing with this. You can't really be a top tier movie, at least in my mind, if your story is so flawed. And now maybe, again, this might just be a personal preference thing. I don't know if it is based on the reviews I've read, but this is my view. What I found in this movie was there's so many points in this story where they were where it's unnecessary characters. And it's why are you doing this? Why are you making the story overcomplicated, right? Because sometimes a simple, basic story is enough for you to be satisfied, right? You don't need to make it, again, I feel like I really want to go to a sports analogy. But you don't need to make it an overly complicated story with all these, something just the simple things work. And what I mean by that, I think, is the whole villain subplot basically could have been taken out of this movie, and I don't think it would have been that bad. You find another reason for them to relocate to water people, and then you just kind of roll with it from there, and you go and you talk about the mystery of the father, and for the other girl, and then you do all the other stuff. And again, no way I'm gonna get any character's name. Not only do I not have it in front of me, but I couldn't remember the character's name if I saw the cast list. So I if you want character names or any accurate information on that front, I'm not the person for you. But there was all these things that the whale creature, again, not gonna remember any names, who got exiled, we never really got a resolution to that storyline, right? We never really got a resolution to any of the, and again, I know they're kind of sequel setting up in a lot of ways, which is disappointing, but again, I think there were enough emotional beats, and that actually I found the most compelling part of the story, not the stuff with the stray cat kid, but and the old bad guy who now is a Avatar. Again, the other thing I didn't really like about this, the one thing I really wish they did explain, which they explained a lot about the first movie, the one thing they didn't really explain was they never really explained how avatars came to be. And I can't remember, and I haven't seen the first one in literally since it came out, I guess. So in my mind, I'm like, what the hell? I don't even remember how this happens. And if they explained in the movie, I did not catch it, and I was paying attention, so I don't know why because at that point, I was definitely paying attention to the movie. So, I mean, I don't know why I wish they did a better job explaining that, because I was still kind of confused about that, and then also the whole death thing. I don't know. So, I would have liked a little bit more of that, of all the exposition. Also, you don't really need a narrator in the story, You can, I guess it was fine. It's just unnecessary. It feels a little bit too lazy to put a narrator in the story, but again, what do I know, I guess. So that was those were two of my biggest problems with this, I think. And then I think, again, you move the story toward more of them adapting, because that was the most interesting story. I don't think anyone really cared all that much about the whole big thing. Just they had to set up the big third act fight. Again, I don't know, why did this need to be more than a very simple kind of movie? Why did you have to add all these characters and becoming villains? And I know, sure, there's some social commentary there, I'm sure, but I don't know, could you not have done something? And the other thing is Pandora's world itself is really, really cool, right? But it's almost, you know what I'm gonna call this? I'm gonna call this monster movie syndrome, okay? Because this is what I found. And I think a lot of people agree with me on this. Okay, so you look at a movie like Godzilla or King Kong, right? That kind of universe. What was the biggest flaw with the Godzilla King of Monsters movie specifically? Biggest flaw: too many people. You don't care about the people. You're watching the monster movie for the monsters, right? And I think, although this is not nearly as egregious, I think there's still an extent of almost you want to watch this Avatar movie for Pandora, right? I don't really care about the human aspect of this at all, right? I know, again, I understand it, but I don't care about it. And what I mean by that is, I think you can just move away from that completely and just go straight up Pandora. You can't tell me there's no internal conflict within Pandora and in politics, politically, right? You can't tell me there's nothing else that's happened. I don't need the human element, again, for it to be the kind of, for it to be the movie it is. I don't think, especially in this one, again, I'm not talking about the first one because I cannot remember that one enough to actively talk on it. But I think this one, it felt like I don't even care about these. Watching them adapt to being water people is more interesting than any of this other random stuff, right? Even the kid dying. Again, this is a spoiler review, I guess, so I can talk about whatever I want, but I didn't really care all that much. I know there were a lot of people in the theater who were crying, but a few people at least. But I didn't really care that much because I didn't feel invested in the character enough. Because I didn't feel angry at the human because there was also little motivation. That's the other thing, is villain motivation. I think is a very important thing, and I've always hated the motivation of revenge as as just general revenge being the real motivation for something. But yeah, I mean, overall, again, this was an above average movie. The visuals and graphics obviously are amazing, beyond amazing. Again, the cinematography was amazing. Even the music was amazing. The sound effects of the score, right, all that stuff was great. I think my biggest problem still comes back, and often when I look at a movie, it's always within the story very often within the story I have the most issues, because that's the thing I think that keeps people engaged. Again, great visuals are a plus, and it's wonderful, but the thing that you need and the thing you need to make sure is good, especially if you're going to have a 3 hour or even more than that potentially in the future movie, you need to make sure the story is worth that. And I don't think this could have been any longer. If this was any longer, I think this would be a very different conversation. But and I think it could have been shorter. Again, not going to penalize it because I think there was still 2 hours 45 minutes ish worth of stories. Within that, I think, again, there was probably 15-20 minutes you could have cut from that movie. But other than that, I mean, because the visuals are so good, you can live with that 15-20 minutes being in there because there were just times where you just admire the visuals, and that's good, right? But yeah, that's really my thoughts. Again, if you want to know what I think, give it out of a 10, I'd probably give it like a 6, 5.5, 6 out of 10, which for, again, the fact that it went above my expectations, I do owe people an apology. It was not as terrible as I expected, and I was relatively entertained throughout the movie. I might go back and watch the first one. Maybe I'll do it as an audio commentary. Who knows? But thank you all for watching. What did you think of the movie? If you loved it, let me know why. And if you hated it, let me know why. Because I just feel indifferent about this movie, really. If Black Adam is considered bad and Glass Onion is considered great, it is directly in the middle of that. Like, Black Adam was a terrible movie, while Glass Onion was like the best movie of the year, maybe. Well, you have to check out podcasts for that one. But yeah, I think it really lands right in the middle. So thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share your thoughts, follow us on social media, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.